Hello and welcome to Karen's Piano Blog. I thought I would start this new month and new school year with a talk on studio policy. Each of us has one, and I'm inviting everybody to visit and revisit this on an annual basis so that you know that it is serving you well and serving your clients and families well. Why would we have a studio policy? Well, music is an art, but it is also our business. Without the details of the business end of things laid out ahead of time, confusion can occur, and it can occur on both sides of things where you think that students would automatically understand something, but they don't. This could be their first session with a child in piano lessons. And parents often are not fully aware, even from one studio to the next, what the policies are. Having it written out and laid out for them to fill out and sign allows for complete clarity of the business end of things, which ultimately saves time at the lessons because those questions won't be arising at that point. When do I use the studio policy? Well, I present it every September. That isn't to say it's the only time I refer to it. Any but time somebody asks a question that can be addressed in an answer by the policy, I refer them to it. Once the students section of the policy is filled out for each child, I scan the original document and then I hand it back with my signature on it to the student's family so that they can post it on a bulletin board, the fridge, even possibly just put it in the front of the student's binder that they use for dictation and theory homework so that they are completely aware of what the policy is for the studio on a regular basis. So who do I give this to? Well, everyone. Now that doesn't mean I hand one to each child, especially the 6 and 7-year-olds. What I do is I hand it to the family member, usually the parents, who are paying the bill. In some cases, I do have teenagers who are responsible for paying their bills themselves, as well as young adults and adults who clearly take care of it for themselves, and thus they do have it given to them for them to sign. But I try to be equitable and make this something that is experienced by all families equally. So the question is, what am I including in my studio policy? Well, of course, we're going to start with student information. We need to have their name, their age. We need to know an email and phone number. Now, there might be multiple phone numbers. There could be a cell phone number. I do find those very handy so that if I have a student who comes out of high school during a spare, they can contact me if there is a class change due to an assembly and that they might be a few minutes late. Or students that come from out of town can contact me if weather got bad partway in or they have been delayed because of an accident or just general traffic flow. I do feel that it's important for us to assure each family that we will not be sharing the cell phone numbers, but only using it for that type of situation. And of course, the one last thing that is very important, that if we ourselves become sick, it is important for us to stop the students to come into a home that might have a virus that could be shared. And the easiest way to ensure that the family gets the information is to use that cell phone number. They don't check their email every day and multiple times the day as some people once did. We do need a complete address, including the postal code. I like to collect the name of the school that the children are attending, and this can be interesting because a family of 2 or 3 children could have 2 or 3 different schools depending on age. I ask what the school hours are. High schools often start earlier in the morning. The French schools and the schools like Pearson, which is a music school of the arts here, sometimes start later. Knowing this can allow you to utilize your daytime more easily. Special considerations. These considerations go from things like, does the child have any challenges with subjects at school? If they have challenges with math and English, for instance, we are liable to also see elements of that appear in their piano learning process. Someone who does not read words well often has challenges with reading music. Music is a language. So I do like to know if there's any challenges such as that. I like to know if there's any allergies I should be aware of. If a student has peanut allergies and things like that, it is very important that we are aware of things so that we can protect them. A good general policy is to ask all students to wash their hands on your site just ahead of their piano lesson. This protects those students who are able to transfer particles from one person's hands of perhaps peanuts or eggs to the keys and having the sensitive person affected by this. It also allows for a better ability to control the rate that viruses can be transferred from one student to the next just through the key surface. When we protect our students, we are also protecting ourselves, whether we have allergies ourselves or indeed every one of us is trying to avoid catching the colds and flus that may come into our studios on a regular basis. In special considerations, I also make a gentle request that I know if there's restrictions on repertoire for any reason, such as a religious point of view or a political point of view, this would be the time to find out that a student might not celebrate Christmas, for instance, because that would affect how you planned that portion of their lesson plan. If the student is a transfer student, having them write down what their playing level is. You will need to do an assessment. I'm not saying that this replaces that, but having a quick glance at piece of information that as you're going through a busy day, you have the ability to go, oh, right, this student has already started grade 4 with the previous teacher, for instance. Within the telephone interview and in-person interview, you may encounter other pieces of information that you want included in the student information. Give yourself a couple of lines blank to include that type of thing so that more can be sitting right here for everybody to sign. After the student information, it's imperative that we clarify our studio hours. There's two facets to this: the teaching hours during the week and the teaching weeks during the year. The teaching hours during the week, we do need to convey when our studios are open. Many of us have our studios in our homes, and as such, it's very easy for students, parents to make a request that we just find a time after 8 at night this one week and give us the reason why. And they are not trying to specifically take our private time away from us. They've just got a scheduling challenge themselves. However, we do have our own family to respect. A portion of our homes often is dedicated to this, and thus having specific studio hours that are respected is an element of having a home business. If you don't teach on weekends, make sure people know that. Teaching weeks during the year, I will actually lay out that I follow the school year and have 2 weeks off at Christmas and 1 week off during March break. You could call the December break instead of Christmas if you feel that you have students that don't want to equate that break to the Christmas holiday specifically. For myself, because I'm an examiner, I also point out that lessons conclude a little bit earlier in the year so that I can go out examining in the last 2 weeks of June. Having that full year laid out is an important aspect. Include the stat holidays that you're honoring. If you are teaching on Mondays and you accept all stat holidays as is and are choosing not to make up those lessons in the balance of the week, your Monday students will be down approximately 1 month of teaching because they have Thanksgiving Monday, Family Monday, Easter Monday, and Victoria Day Monday all off. Myself, I find that most students are completely open to coming on Family Day and Easter Monday because many parents don't get these days off. With regards to Thanksgiving and Victoria Day, frequently I find that families do want to have a family time, and I would like to myself. So each of us has to decide, are we making up those lessons during the week, or are they going to have a missed lesson? I'm careful who comes on Monday so that if it turns out that some of the lessons will be missed, for instance on Victoria Day and Thanksgiving, that I can give them a 2-week project ahead of these stat holidays and know that it can be followed. But be clear, and as much as is possible, cite specific dates each year so that the families that are affected by things can mark those elements on the calendar. Be sure to have a clear policy about your teaching hours on professional development days at schools. These days can be both a blessing and a curse. Some families have an incredibly difficult time locating appropriate drivers on PD days because they take them to the grandparents, for instance, and they have a special day that way and they don't have to book a babysitter. Or they might have even tried to have a sleepover. There are many things that can happen with PD days. Again, choose carefully the people that you would put on Friday because those are the days that are most commonly affected by the professional development days in the school system. And again, remember that the professional development days will be different between elementary school, high school, and private school. So having an idea ahead of time can be really helpful if people can provide you with the layout of the PD days for the year. After studio hours, there should be a cancellation policy, and you should address it in the 3 areas that are most commonly occurring: illness, vacation, and weather. Many teachers have the policy that regardless of the reason, if a student gives less than 24 hours notice, it is considered a lesson taken. Now, when it comes to illness, the challenge that I have a couple of times gotten into, and actually more than a couple of times, is that students who are incredibly ill are brought to the lesson so that the parents don't forfeit the fees. They want to use the fees. After having had my piano thrown up on, and actually contracting chickenpox as an adult, I came to the decision for my studio that I would prefer not to have an ill child at the lesson. And honestly, they often do not have a good lesson when they are ill. So once in December break, once in March break, and once at the beginning of summer, I will offer an illness makeup lesson. I will keep a diary of who has had an illness lesson. There are times that the students choose not to take them because they are away or one thing and another during the times I'm offered. The other thing that I do also with illness time is that if a student immediately following somebody who has had an illness is going to be absent, I will contact the parent and ask whether they would like me to extend the lesson by 15 minutes to take part of that time owing, and that perhaps we'll get another opportunity. With half-hour lessons, it actually usually works out that we would gladly have an extra 15 minutes here and there. And I find that this works out well, and parents appreciate not having to figure out a lesson in the middle of a family holiday, for instance. With regards to vacations, the challenge is that many families would prefer, unless the parents are teachers, to take their vacations during a week that is not the December break or the March break, because that's when the fees are the highest on travel and destinations are the most crowded. However, in doing that, that means they are away from their lessons during a normal learning week. Vacation lessons have to be approached with a personal policy that you will stand by and be equitable. My biggest challenge is weather. I do have a number of people who come into town, sometimes driving up to 2 hours to get to me. And that would be 4 hours of driving in total back and forth. And some days it just is not a logical thing weather-wise for them to be safe, especially in Southern Ontario, which is where I live. I don't feel that we can really penalize a family for the sky suddenly dumping inches of snow on us. But in those moments, you can decide how you're going to handle these. Again, you can do the weather makeup lessons during the December, March break and beginning of July, as earlier stated. Or for myself, I find that these days, setting up Skype or FaceTime allows you to have a lesson. You won't be working quite as diligently on tone quality and things like that, but you can certainly do technique. You can drill them on their memory. You can work through the ear training very easily. There are many things that you can teach. Theory can be scanned from their house to you, and you can discuss it and mark it while they have it. They can grab a red pen and you can say, please circle the third answer in line 1. Why is this not an F? Can you look at the key signature? It is possible to use this time without having anybody be unsafe by the drive. But you do need to prepare for this element. After discussion of the cancellation policy, I do like to point out what the parent's responsibility is here. They need to know what books and supplies to purchase. Are you willing to loan books, or are they purchasing every book that the child will be playing from? Do they need a dictation book? What kind of dictation book are you expecting them to have? I find a binder works because I can add in sheets that will benefit their piano playing by doing a few minutes of table work at the beginning of the lesson. I also have a technique outline that the students put in and chording sections, so they can sectionalize their binder more easily than they can do this in a spiral bound book. But each parent and each teacher can figure out what's going to be the best bet for their child. The main thing is to make sure that this is in place and that the parents understand what to do as a purchase, but also that the parents understand what to do with that book on a weekly basis. Young children do not have a high level of reading comprehension, and if in the middle of a lesson we are doing a half writing, half printing, they may not even be able to read every word. Parents do need, after the lesson, to go over the assignment with their child, particularly on that first day. That helps them get off to a good start. And then I ask the parents to revisit it on the 4th or 5th day to make sure that nothing has been missed in between. If they wait till the drive to the lesson, that which was missed does not have a chance to be recovered. When I speak of attendance at lessons being the parent's responsibility, I'm speaking to, is it part of your policy that if you have a young beginner, the parents must attend every lesson, a portion of every lesson, once a month? What is your policy? I do recommend an open door policy that embraces the parents being part of this situation. If we can have a triangle with parent, teacher, and student established from the first lesson, we have a better chance of success in the long run. And I also address the overseeing of home practicing. Yes, this is linked to reading the assignment book, but also the piano can be a very lonely instrument. We don't have piano orchestras and piano choirs to be part of that adds a social element. So children can very often feel rather lonely when they are at the piano, especially if they're just not quite focused in that moment. So a parent being able to be aware and part of the regular practice is an ideal situation. Performance expectations need to be itemized in the studio policy. I have bi-monthly performance classes. These are not considered optional, though there is no penalty if a student doesn't come due to illness or something that has occurred in their life that has taken them away from the city. Part of the whole process of learning at private lessons is actually learning how to present yourself in public. Neglecting to include performance opportunities for your student is neglecting an important aspect of their education. Many parents have said to me that their child has been better doing their speeches at school and being part of drama once they became comfortable at my performance classes. I have a big recital at the end of the year. My performance classes tend to be smaller groups of children, and grade 3, 4, 5, often it is just the students that are playing for each other at performance classes, particularly grade 9 and 10 and associate. They're trying to learn from each other in that moment. But the parents are certainly encouraged to come and support if they would care to as well. At the end of the year, I have a larger recital where students are expected to come together in a bigger group and perform by memory. These things are outlined. Entrance into the studio. Most teachers have a situation where a student has an assigned door where they let themselves in without ringing the doorbell so that they can let themselves in, go to the washroom for washing their hands without interrupting the last 5 minutes of the previous student's lesson. Parents and child alike need to be aware of what door to use, whether they are expected to take off their shoes at the door and where to put them so that the next student doesn't trip over them. Those elements need to clearly be in place, and where they're to put their coats. And the whole idea of punctuality does need to be addressed, unfortunately, at this point. It is imperative that families understand that they are booking a period of time. They are contracting you, let's say, for example, from 3:30 till 4 o'clock on Tuesday. If they are delayed and don't arrive until 10 to 4, next lesson will still begin with the next student at 4 o'clock because they have booked 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, for instance. So it is important for parents to understand that they need to agree to a time that they can arrive, and that punctuality really means arriving early. If they can arrive 5 minutes early, it allows for the students to get their outerwear off in the middle of winter, some sort of slipper or shoe on for pedaling, wash their hands, and have their books out ready for the lesson at the time that they're assigned to begin. In this way, we don't lose precious moments at the beginning of every lesson. In the studio policy, I include an area that says your assigned time is, and the fee for that is. I continue this and say that the cumulative fee for the entire year is. So if a student is coming in, and I'm going to use round numbers, for a half-hour lesson for $10 a half-hour lesson, and they typically have 4 lessons a month. If that comes out to 40 lessons a year, I will actually quote that they are paying $400 for the year September through to the end of June. I find that parents who see the final total right up front tend to be more supportive of the regular practicing because they aren't just thinking it's $40 here and $40 there. They're seeing the $400 commitment. And imagine that if it was an hour student at $20, then that would be $800 per year. These things allow the parents to be much more aware and to make their choices carefully about whether they're going to actually miss a few practices here or there. Do clarify how you want to be paid. In this century, there is electronic payments. You can accept e-payment online. You could actually be doing this by credit card. You can be doing this by check. You can be doing it by cash. In general, with cash, please ensure that parents understand that you won't take time out to providing change every lesson, that if they are choosing to do cash, it will be written down in your book, and that it needs to be an exact amount. You also need to clarify when you expect payment. Some studios run on a semester system where they ask for payment for the first and the second term. Others go by the month. Are you expecting to be paid at the beginning of the month? Are you collecting post-dated checks for the first term and then post-dated checks for the second term? How is this going to be addressed? Try to do it in such a way that you can manage the paperwork easily. And then there's the incredible question, what about being flexible? I do consider it imperative that the middle name of every private teacher, regardless of their instrument, be flexible. We need to adjust to the needs of every specific student and every family. So there are times that I break these rules. If a family suddenly discovers that grandma has had a stroke and that parents are at the hospital, I realize this isn't an illness lesson, but I will count it as an illness lesson and I will make it up. With my adult students, they might have aging parents. There are different elements with adult students that causes me to be a bit more flexible with them. But by and large, the important aspect of this is to have a policy in place and then to know when it is going to be advantageous to just bend a little bit. Consider including in your contract the date of the receipt or receipts. It is our responsibility to provide an individual receipt for each child and how much is paid for that child, not the family, but each child. It is the only way that the parents can use these receipts for their arts credits. We are responsible for giving this to them, whether they have paid through Visa, PayPal, cash, or check. We need to keep good records. By providing them with the date of the receipts, though, some families think that if they hand you a check at the beginning of the month, that you would turn around and again take time during that lesson to make the receipt right then and there. I find that this takes time out of the lesson. I choose to only give the receipt at the end of the year or at the end of the final lesson. Should a student know that they are finishing at the end of grade 10 and the grade 10 is August 10th, then I will have calculated things out so that they can have their receipt in August. Is that it? Well, all of this policy so far has been talking about what the family has to expect. Your responsibility is very clearly there too. You must keep accurate financial records. You must have a studio with appropriate resources. And you need to embrace the one-on-one value and providing of that value. We charge for a situation that provides this student with the optimum. They get undivided attention one-on-one with their piano lessons. In it being one-on-one, that means that it is our responsibility to create a program that is individual. We cannot choose to be turn-the-page teachers that assign the same beginner method to every child, regardless of their interest, age, and ability. And now, I hope that you will have fun, for a new year has begun. Whether it's a returning student or someone brand new, we need to look at this as an opportunity to help them to learn how to learn in general, to learn to appreciate music, and to learn to love making music. For that is what this is all about. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next time.